Welcome to the season finale of the Mental Health Podcast. Today is a very, very special show. Back in May, I had the privilege of interviewing Brooke Bralove on art therapy. And I decided after the show to go ahead and give it a try and see if it would help with my traumas. And let me tell you, after this therapy, I am no longer making decisions from trauma, and I am empowered. I can't wait for you to hear the rest of this show and see how art therapy can help you become the best you possible. Enjoy the show.
I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get out of it.
It's so hard today.
You don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any motivation.
But overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself,
with my friends.
because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I need somebody to help me.
Welcome to the Mental Health Podcast. This is your host, Barbie Moreno, and I am here today again with our host, with Brooke Bralove. She was on our show on May 24th, 2023, where we talked about the art process, which is a healing process that she uses in her therapies. And then I decided to go ahead and try it. So the agreement was I would try it. And then if interested, maybe I would come back and we would talk about it. And I was very interested. So welcome back.
Thank you, Barbie. I'm so excited that you get to share about your own experience with accelerated resolution therapy.
Yes. And we will make sure that we have all of your information in the description, because I do think it's important for them to have the actual name, your contact information. And then on the previous episode, we talked about the fact that there are always people in different areas. They could just go on this list and look and find somebody who's certified in this in their area, correct?
You got it. You can do a search on acceleratedresolutiontherapy.com, and you can search by state for practitioners in near you.
Perfect. Well, so I was writing notes on what did I want to talk about, because I just literally feel like, I think my first session with you was in June, maybe like beginning mid-June. And we're now in mid-August of 2023. And I've had 3 sessions, and I think I'm just a different person. Well, I know I'm just a different person.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know we have confidentiality agreements and stuff like that, but I'm okay talking about my experiences. So feel free on your side of it. Like, I'm not worried about you saying something that would upset that.
Okay.
So for those that don't know the process, I know that you cannot really talk about exactly what goes on during the sessions, on this podcast, which I totally understand, because then I think that, I don't know, I can understand why they would need to go through it in order for them to understand the actual process. But the first thing I say is, when I say I'm a different person, is I'm literally not making decisions from trauma.
Wow. That's amazing. What a fabulous statement to be able to say.
Do you find that's a common statement?
It is, maybe not that sort of eloquent, though. I mean, I think when I talk to people about their experience with art, they'll certainly say things like, I feel more confident, I feel less triggered, I'm not as reactive, those kinds of things. But I just love what you're saying, right? Which is that your resting place no longer is trauma.
Yeah.
Right. That, because your starting line, I think what I'm hearing you saying is that for most of your life, a start of the race was with your feet entrenched in trauma.
Right.
And now you've just got nothing but road ahead of you.
And it's so true. So for those that haven't listened to previous podcasts, I have dealt with depression and anxiety and working through issues of just a very, everybody has stuff that goes on in their life. So my life happened to be one that was not, one traumatic episode, but a long series of just a lot. And so when you come from that place in depression, in an anxiety, even on medication, I've tried TMS therapy, which people can look up TMS therapy, but basically it's like electric shock therapy in a lower convulsion rate, basically, that you do over a longer period of time. It's a dedication. You literally have to go all of the time for a long period of time. And that did not help me with me. Now, everybody's different, but that did not help me. It didn't remove what I would say is like a fog or a cloud of just constant feeling of it's never gonna be better.
That hopelessness, really.
Mm-hmm. It really was.
Mm-hmm.
And even medication, it can help pull you out from a very deep trench, right? But I don't feel like it gives you hope for the future. It gives you the ability to not want to off yourself today, or maybe you can get out of bed today, but it doesn't give you a bright hope for the future. And I know but I know for a lot of people, medication is hard because it takes a lot of different ways. You have to try a lot of different ones to even see what works. So sometimes people don't even get to a place where they can get out of bed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing that I hear you saying so much is, while maybe my symptoms of depression are alleviated, thank God, what I don't still know how to do or feel capable of is how not to keep doing the same thing over and over again based on being triggered in the moment and then responding as if the trauma were still going on. And, that seems to be what feels different for you. Barbie, I'm just curious, I know I did a whole episode with you on what art is, but would it be helpful for me just to kind of give a little tiny blurb about what the heck we're even talking about?
Absolutely. You were reading my mind because that was going to be the next thing I did before we move forward. So perfect.
Okay. So accelerated resolution therapy, also known as ART or ART, is an evidence-based treatment modality that uses rapid eye movement to change the way the brain stores distressing images and sensations. It is similar to EMDR in that it uses that bilateral brain stimulation, but it really goes beyond EMDR, which is about desensitization. And art takes it one step further into something called positization. So we basically use these relaxing eye movements to help people manage those body sensations that result from remembering the trauma or being in a depressive episode or doing their OCD behavior or being in their eating disorder or struggling with body image. And we calm those sensations. And then we actually replace them and we make them more positive and ask people to store that in the brain. And so the rapid eye movement, we think, replicates REM sleep, which is where memories are consolidated. So we're basically doing a sort of natural thing the body does at night, but we're getting in there and saying, wait, don't store that in those negative images again. Let's give the brain something really to stick to. And those are much more positive images. So I definitely just wanted to say that. And art usually only requires 1 to 5 sessions per sort of issue. But as you see, you worked on 3 completely different things.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, got better after 1 session on each of those things.
Yeah, I actually didn't remember that you said 1 to 5 per issue, because for me, it was just 1. And again, I know everybody is different and stuff, but it just worked so well. Now, that being said, I do have to give you credit because you do use your intuition and say, yeah, I don't quite think we're there yet. We're not quite finished with that. Let's go back and redo it, or something doesn't feel resolved. So I do think that it depends on the practitioner and the fact that they're willing to either, as humans, we just want to be like, yeah, no, it's better. And then you have to have somebody else who's in your corner going, yeah, maybe it's a little better, but it doesn't feel like it's 100% gone. And that's what we're working for.
Yeah, and that is really common. I mean, when I ask clients to make their memory positive and, how they want to remember it, they actually struggle. And I think this is the sign of trauma, which is that their bar is so low, their ceiling is so low about what's possible. And the thing about art is we ask people to think about an absolute dream, which means it doesn't actually need to be real. The brain doesn't need a story to be real to hang on to it. And I don't actually know that, what that's called or anything, but I literally picture the brain saying, can you give me something good? Don't give me something a little better, like that incident just didn't happen. Give me the fact that, if it's an assault, for instance, give me the fact that superheroes came down and locked arms with you and you fought off an attack, and then you went to Hawaii with your family and your loved ones for a month's vacation. That the brain is like, okay, that's good. I'll hang on to that.
Well, and it's interesting because as I would then go throughout my day, and the memory that it was replaced with, or the story, because it's not really memory, the story it was replaced with is funny because it would come to me like, oh yeah, like that person's saving me or whatever. Like, so, a lot of my stuff is a lot of childhood stuff. And so when I had to, give myself a new story on whatever it is that I was working on, I still have to talk to some of the people that were part of that. And so when I'm communicating with them, I'm literally replaying my story in my head that I created, showing that situation happening, that my story that I made where it was like a fantasy, kind of basically saving me from that current conversation, knowing because the two are still intertwined and related.
Yeah, I mean, I just wrote down unfinished business. So, with trauma, especially childhood trauma, there is often a failure on parents, teachers, caregivers to protect children. I'm not blaming parents. That does happen, right? Sometimes explicitly or implicitly, or frankly, it's the parents who are doing the harm, right? If you're talking about, physical abuse, sometimes sexual abuse. And so we have unfinished business with those caretakers. We need to talk to them and say, hey, you didn't protect me. I need you to protect me now. And sometimes that's the way I think a scene should go. But if someone, for instance, has never been able to have a better relationship with that caretaker, then I might say, why don't you bring in an ideal parent? I had a guy the other day who needed to kind of handle some unfinished business with his father, who frankly was just not a great guy. And I said, well, you could go choose any father. And he said, Ferris Bueller's dad. And isn't that great? And he brought in Ferris Bueller's dad as his dad. And that created that thing I'm always looking for, which is this just eruption into a big smile. And that's when I know the person has found the replacement images that actually heal them. And I don't quit. I mean, I'm sure you've seen me, as you said, sort of being kind of relentless. I will not quit until I really believe they've healed a part of themselves. And that's usually related to earlier selves. Maybe you need to go back and talk to your earlier self and say, you're doing a great job. You're going to be okay. I promise you'll go to college, or, I promise you'll find your way. And sometimes we have to do it with other people.
And the reason why I feel like this is so different than traditional talk therapy is because, so let's just use an instance of if it's your mother and you still have to deal with your mother in everyday interaction, and your mother is completely oblivious to the things that she did to you. Some people really don't remember. Some people didn't know, they were unconscious, like they were making decisions out of their own pain, their own trauma. And so if you talk to them about it, they're going to get defensive. It's going to cause a fight. Nothing will ever be resolved, right? And so traditional talk therapy, you talk about what's going on, and oftentimes you're, given tasks to maybe go and communicate what you feel to these people. And it brings this weird, crazy situation up where now you're re-traumatizing yourself, right? And so I loved that you could resolve it, put a different, you would say, go to the parent store and pick out a parent, right? And so you put a different parent in that situation who maybe in your situation, that parent is amazing, like Ferris Bueller's dad, right? And so now you just kind of like you change it so that you don't have to go and actually talk to that person or re-traumatize yourself. And it's traumatizing when you went through something, you went through something, and then people totally gaslight you and act like it didn't happen. So that doesn't make it work better. So this, you don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think there's an acceptance that comes. And so, because you're not going to be as triggered in the present by that person, so I've worked with several people with narcissistic ex-husbands, for instance, and they work through some of the past trauma of being in the marriage, and then they report that they have no problem interacting with that co-parent now. Whereas before they would be agitated, fight, flight, or freeze, panic attacks, crying, very anxious. Now they're indifferent. I mean, they just don't have a lot of feelings. They still don't think the guy's a great guy. That's not going to change. And nor would we want it to change, because you have to protect yourself. But this one specific patient just wasn't triggered anymore. She was just like, yep, there's that narcissist doing his narcissistic thing. And okay, I see it. All right.
I'm not going to react to it.
Right.
Right.
So I really think the thing that you feel over and over again after art is not being triggered, which allows you then to stay grounded in yourself and make decisions from a place of integrity rather than trauma.
Exactly. I agree 100% with that statement. Matt, and so many things that you said, and then I'm in my mind going, okay, and then I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to say this. But, I think it's important for people to understand it's not, the situation doesn't vanish from your mind. So, and here's why this is important. So if you're somebody who was like, let's say you were sexually abused by a parent, and you want to protect your children because you know what a predator looks like, you don't want it to vanish because you want to be able to use those tools that you have in sensing when things are right and wrong, and how things, you just don't add up. You don't want it to vanish. You want to be able to take the tools out of it. But what you don't want to do is be reacting emotionally and triggering and always in this constant hell is what it feels like.
Right. Yes. In art, we say, keep the knowledge, lose the pain. So you don't forget facts. You're in, it's not hypnosis. There's absolutely nothing that goes on where you're not fully in control of yourself and your choices during the entire session. And, but you need the knowledge. You don't need the pain. It doesn't actually function in a way to teach you something. The knowledge does.
Right. And the brain, when we're put in those situations, and if we're still stuck in the trigger, then treats it like it's happening all over again, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, Vietnam veterans or any of our veterans will tell you, that specifically 4th of July or anytime there's a, car, backfiring, they literally feel as if they are there. They cannot distinguish it. And sometimes it can take them minutes to be able to, if not actually a lot longer, to even be able to come out of, sort of that place where they literally cannot tell the difference. And specifically what matters, even if your brain has the knowledge that it's different, right? That is a car backfiring. I know that. The whole point is that your body doesn't care about facts. It just responds to the trigger. So your body thinks you're still there, which is why you feel re-traumatized.
Right.
And
which is where you
mhm.
have to in a situation where you have to see the person over and over again who had at some point caused you to have whatever trauma or whatever it is you're trying to work through. When you go through this, then when you see that person, you do see them for who they are, but you don't go through the feeling of almost like panic and anxiety and all of those different things that flood your system the minute you see them normally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, this is a body and brain based therapy. We want to change. Yes, we change feelings, but we do that through the body, through sensations, because all feelings reside in the body. A lot of people don't know this. And even if they do know it, they can't actually find feelings or emotions in their body. So I will say, and I'll ask you, do you think it's helpful to have some body awareness to do this therapy?
Well, I think I think yes, it is helpful. I don't think it is required when you have somebody like you who I feel like can guide somebody into body awareness. I would say I'm very aware. And also in our first session, it was still hard for me because it's almost like once you're put on the spot, you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. This is too much. You know what I mean? And then so you have you who guides into, okay, well, let's talk about this, or where does this feel this. So whether or not you have body awareness or not, I think you can do it because you're guided into, you're given more tools on how to actually like figure this out. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would say, so like for me, I feel like, my story is a bit like I'll probably do multiple more sessions because there's a lot to unpack in my life. But I think that it's not to negate, like if you're just somebody who you got lucky and you got some great parents and you had good teachers and you had a good childhood and you had a really great life, but then one thing happened to you that just completely, traumatized you or tore you up, or something that maybe you don't feel like it traumatized you, but it sticks with you. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
recognize that it is traumatizing you, but maybe you don't feel, maybe you went to a work thing and something happened and nothing else has ever happened since, and nothing in your life was bad before, but that one thing, now you don't feel like you feel comfortable when you go to a work event. It's perfect for that, because we don't realize that we're making decisions based on these things in our past that we think we've gotten over.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, and we call that single incident trauma, and so art is exceptional for single incident trauma. I can usually knock that out in one session, occasionally two, but almost never more than that, because it's so specific, it's so time limited, and you want to lose that. So I have had people, in my office, literally in the middle of a session, just not I mean, from second to second, have a terrible, terrible image in their mind. And then literally 10 seconds later, we're doing eye movements. They can't see the image anymore. It
I
literally
experienced that.
vanishes.
Yeah, I experienced that. It's like you have to go like, well, what happened? Hold on, I can't see it. Like it was so bad, and that's just like gone. It's just so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can attest to this. I mean, there is a kind of what, can I curse on here?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
What literally, I mean, people will look at me and go, I don't understand what just happened. And I
Yeah.
said, well, you're healing yourself. That's what's happening.
Right. But I think that is something you do have to experience, because you literally go from like literally it's just gone. It's the weirdest thing ever. That's all I can say. It's just gone. And when I say gone, I'm not like, it's not like a magic fairy came and took it away. You know that it happened, but the feelings about it are just not there.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. So crazy. So
Yeah.
I
It's
wrote
very
some,
neutral,
it is
it
very
becomes very
neutral.
neutral.
So I wrote some notes down on my feelings and then about like kind of the things that I came from it. So one thing was it gave me empowerment. And this has empowered me in so many different ways. So one thing was, one, not to allow myself to be re-traumatized by the same people, right? So once like the original part was kind of like taken out, now, like you said, with the lady who has a narcissistic ex-husband, which by the way, I do have a narcissistic ex-husband. That's our next one. Anyways, but the once you remove the feelings that are attached to that person in the past, then when people start up with their bullshit again, you're like, nah, that's your bullshit right now.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
detach it from yourself. You don't,
Yeah.
you
And
don't
that's
own
a
it
great
anymore.
word. That's a really important word. It's emotional detachment. That whereas again, before, it's almost like you would just like fall into the hole and then you're at the bottom going, how am I back in this? Now you might see a hole and go, no, thanks.
Yeah. And that's what happens. You really do. You look at it and you're like, yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We're good.
Yeah.
Or you like, like I said, you like having to deal with certain people in my life that I have worked on some stuff with. And I just see, and I'm just like, wow, like that person's very hurt. It's interesting. You can come to a place of compassion because you can see, since it's no longer emotionally triggering you, you see them for their own pain and what's causing them to act that way. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And I'm sure part of you goes, well, how I would really be helped is if this person got art.
Oh, well, now I have, trust me, there is a list. It's funny. I was actually going to say, so on our original episode, you had said you wished everybody could experience this. And I understand why you say that, because we all have something. It could have been something silly, like somebody called you a nickname and that's not silly, but you know what I mean? Like it sounds silly,
Yeah.
but maybe
Bullying. Yeah.
somebody bullied you and you think that, yeah, it's 40 years later and it shouldn't be affecting you, but deep down inside, you still get that, it's been like, I feel like those are the things that change the way that we act in our lives and react in our lives and the decisions that we make. And so even though we think it's not affecting us, it's actually affecting us so much.
Yeah. And I actually end up working on childhood bullying, even if someone is coming in for something like generalized anxiety or OCD or difficulty with public speaking. To be perfectly honest, we almost always get back to some sort of incident in childhood. And it's usually with, someone saying, you've got a soft voice, what's your problem, right? And
Exactly.
then and that man, has no understanding of where that comes from.
Right.
But when you do eye movements, see, there's such a power in the eye movements, because you can ask these deeper questions that if I said to him, hey, where'd that fear of public speaking come from, he might shrug and say, I don't know, I mean, it just started, so I never had it before, right? But if he's doing that during an art session with eye movements, often that memory will come straight to the surface, loud and clear, and they will get an image. And then we work on that, because that's the origin, right?
Right. The
And a
rest are
lot of
symptoms. The rest are symptoms. The
exactly.
anxiety is the symptom. The public speaking problem is a symptom.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this, I will tell you, even I am surprised sometimes. I was working with a young woman who she was actually having really negative, violent, intrusive images that were so disturbing. She couldn't stop thinking about them. It's, sort of an OCD thought pattern. And, she just needed help with that. And what happened was, based on her body sensations and me asking, when was the first time you remember feeling these body sensations? She then flashed to, a terrible, incident with her father that had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with intrusive thoughts. They had nothing to do with each other, and they were 20 years apart. So then we resolved that, because with accelerated resolution therapy, you do resolve things at the end of every session. And then we went back to the intrusive images. She never had a single one again. And she'd come in, she loved art. She was working on multiple issues. I mean, she just kept coming because it was so effective for her. And she came in weeks later and said, not one image ever after that. So sometimes you can tackle a current problem that you don't even understand or seems random, or where'd this come from, by finding the origin that you don't know anything about consciously.
And it's funny because, like, on our first episode, as open-minded as I feel like I am, I would have probably called bullshit on that. And now that I've experienced, I'm like, yep, that's how it works.
Yeah, right. It is amazing, right? And I'm so grateful to you, Barbie. First of all, I mean, I've just loved working with you. You're just a beautiful, beautiful soul. But I'm just really grateful that you're kind of able to, you learned about it, and now you've done it, and you're willing to talk about it. And I'm so appreciative, because again, when something sounds like magic, that's why I have so many testimonials on my website, and really ask more than any, I've never had a testimonial about, any talk therapy I've done. There's no need. Everybody sort of knows what it is. But when you're trying to help people understand that it's science, but it feels in the moment like magic.
It does. And I guess you really cannot explain that to somebody until they go through it. The only thing that we can do, though, is give people a reason to at least try it, right? At least try it.
Yeah. And I do want to say one thing, because I think it's really important. We are talking about trauma. This art helps. I now believe that art can help with any issue that you would go to regular talk therapy for.
I agree.
So when you say, I don't have trauma, which, a lot of people either don't, thank goodness, amazing luck, or, it's just
those fuckers. No, okay.
Exactly. Right. The 1% of the 1%. Right. But, it can help with depression, anxiety, OCD, phobias, body image, eating disorders, chronic pain, chronic illness, dyslexia, learning disabilities, ADHD. It can just work on how you feel about yourself. And one of my favorite sessions was with a man who was having a lot of confidence issues, just really, really didn't feel confident. And when he kind of rescripted things and did the positization, his image was that he was a beetle during Beatlemania. Right? I mean, how beautiful is that? And his smile was so big and wide. And it really helped. He changed some of his behaviors after that because he felt better about himself.
And I like this too, because I feel like there are some people who are comfortable in talk therapy talking about what's going on. And then there are some people who they just either don't know how to express what's going on, or they're just not comfortable talking to a complete stranger about it, or, they're ashamed. Right? Sometimes we've done stuff or have things done to us, or a lot, where shame comes in. And so we can't talk about it. So we'll talk about all the other stuff we want to talk about, but we're not going to bring up the one thing that's going to completely help us heal, because we can't bring it up because of the shame or the guilt or whatever behind it. So I love this because we don't talk about what's going on. I don't even know that I tell you what I'm working on. I don't even think I tell you that what I'm working on. Sometimes you might ask a question here or there if we're not getting into like if I'm not getting into it 100% to try to work through that. But it's not a long wow, when I was, 7, I was asleep in my room and so came in and reliving that entire trauma all over again. It's not talking like that. It's doing the work without all of this extra stuff that I don't think people feel comfortable doing.
Yeah. And they may not feel comfortable, at all, but also a lot of people who come to me have done, a bunch of different kind of therapies,
10
and they've
years
talked
I've
and
done.
talked. Exactly. And they've talked and talked and talked. And I'm sure you have made so many tremendous strides, but you still couldn't lose this acute traumatic body response.
Yep.
And because talking about it won't help it. Again, I love talk therapy. I'm a huge fan. I've been doing it 20 years and I'll continue to do it.
Right.
But when people cannot get beyond something, and they've tried all the other methods,
Right.
art is great. And you're absolutely right, we do not re-traumatize at all in art, because you don't have to talk about it. I could help you could come into my office and say, I've had a trauma, I actually do not want to tell you about it, and I can still help them. Now, the way I work, which is extremely important to me, is that I do like to know if the person is willing to share as much as they're willing to share. But we do that in about 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the first intake session. And then I say, okay, now we don't ever need to talk about it again.
Right.
And the reason I do that is I strongly believe in connection as healing. And I do want to be connected. And as you know, the more I know, then I can really help you, then I get relentless with, that's not quite good enough. I don't think your heart needs that to heal. I think it needs something about this. What do you think? Then we have a little bit more kind of rapport, and I can make more suggestions to you. So I see it as I can be more helpful to you, but I've absolutely helped people and had basically no idea what they were working on.
Right. Which I feel like is amazing, in particular, like I think in general, but for men who, because they've been told to keep their emotions to themselves, to not be weak, to, and all of these different things. And so they hold so much shame and stuff on the things that they shouldn't hold shame on, but, they do because of the way they were told, they had to feel and stuff. So I don't know. So the next thing I wrote down is stop waiting around. So stopped waiting around, meaning that I literally now look back and think I was waiting for my life to start. Like I was waiting for something, like, but I'm a busy person. Like I do a lot of stuff, right? Like if somebody was to look back and say, like, they wouldn't be like, oh, she didn't do anything with her life. If you look back at the 43 years of my life, but there was a part of me that was still kind of waiting to live.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? And so it was, and I don't know weird's the right term, but that's what it was. It was like waiting to live, like waiting to feel, here is what it is, waiting to feel worthy to live.
Yeah. Aw. Yeah. Yes. And again, how do you explain to someone by moving their eyes rapidly and doing some a really clear sort of protocol, they're going to feel worthy.
Yeah.
They're going to feel full from the inside out, which is full of their embodied self. I mean, in some ways you have come into your body in a way.
Yeah.
Because you had to dissociate, as many trauma survivors have to do just to survive. But you're sort of, I mean, this gives you permission to be whoever you want to be, whatever you want to be.
Right. And it's interesting too, because I found through that, so feeling worthy, I stopped projecting myself onto other people. So I never realized what a judgmental asshole I was.
Okay.
And I always thought I was such a nice person, but in my mind, I was judging everybody all the time. But what I found is that I was judging everybody else because I was judging myself.
Yeah. And when you stop projecting onto people, all your relationships are going to improve. I mean, every single one.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't put your expectations on them anymore. It's like, I'm telling you, when I say it changed everything, it changed everything.
I'm so happy for you. Just so happy.
And so my next thing was, it allowed me to set boundaries. So, you go through I did so many workshops on how to set boundaries, but until you again feel worthy of setting the boundaries, until you have that place where you're like, no, I'm not going to let this happen to me. I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to do this. These are my boundaries. I'm going to stick to it. And I'm worthy of having these boundaries. So let me set boundaries. And I've never been able to keep boundaries. I've always let people push my boundaries. I've set boundaries and then I just let them go right over them. And even for myself, like I'll set, that was my next thing is I would set goals and I would move towards them. But then I would go on this like rabbit hole down this other way. And then I'd be like squirrel over here and then be like squirrel over here. And so then I found myself doing like 5 different things at one time, which I didn't realize was self-sabotage because nobody can do 5 different things at one time well.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so I want to bring you back to the first thing you said at the beginning of this. I no longer make decisions from a place of trauma. And you just, and what you're really saying is instead, I make decisions from a place of worthiness.
Yes.
And man, is that hard and often takes a lifetime. And I'm so happy to be part of your journey, for you to be able to believe how deserving you are. And of course, that's from a lifetime of shame. Right. And so, I do Brene Brown's shame resilience curriculum. So if I put her teachings and art together, I mean, that feels unstoppable, right?
Absolutely.
Because
that's the word that came to my mind, unstoppable.
Yeah. And because again, shame lives in the body, you carry it with you everywhere, and it keeps ceilings low, it keeps people out, and it keeps you in hell. And in your own prison, often images that come up in art are related to people feeling like they are in prison in their own bodies, because that's what trauma does. And that's what these mental health issues do. I mean, body image, that, and I honestly was just as shocked as anyone when I helped the first person I worked with on body image. We did one session, and I mean, it was just unbelievable, the change. I mean, most women would never believe that you can ever let go of that kind of obsessive thinking and feeling.
Right.
Because, most of us just have been dealing with that forever, just to whatever degree, some worse than others. But that can change too with art.
Yeah, and that's much needed. And that's why, like, as we'll talk about more about my experience, but that's why this is important today that we're here talking, because hopefully somebody hears this and then they tell somebody else about it and they go get their, but it continues to be passed on. And so that's why we're lucky to have a platform so that we can at least share the information. And the funny thing is we know as people, maybe somebody hears this today and they're just like, well, whatever, cool. That was nice. That sounded fun. I'm glad she did that. Good for her. She healed. And then they put it in the back of their mind. And then one day they're like, I'm really having a hard time struggling with this. Oh yeah, I listened to that podcast. Let me go find that lady again.
Plant a seed. That's all I want to do sometimes, is just plant a seed for there's a different way in. And I always tell people nothing negative can come out of art. It's just the kind of, treatment. And we're sometimes talking about something, as we know, makes it worse. And so I always say to people, the worst thing that happens is you tried something new and were brave enough to do that, and it just didn't work. And it really does work for almost everyone. There are a few sort of times that I find it harder, but that's usually with people who are totally unaware of their own commitment to their misery. And again, I say this with total compassion, right? Or they've been depressed for so long, it's become who they are and they don't want to give that up. Now, consciously, they'll tell you they don't want to be depressed, but they are committed, and maybe they're in a depression support group. And if they weren't depressed, maybe they'd lose friends or whatever. And so, people do have secondary gain from over identifying with their either mental health diagnosis or their trauma or their, issue.
Even their physical illness, right? Because we know emotion affects our physical. So if we heal emotionally and then all of a sudden we're healing physically, it's almost like I think some people would be like, oh, I don't want to get better, because everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, like she obviously wasn't sick. She was all in her head. You know what I mean? And it's like, we keep ourselves sick so that we're not judged by others. And if we would actually heal, we wouldn't care what others think.
Yeah. And it's important, again, not that anyone's saying I'm going to stay sick, but you have to remember the way the brain works, which is it always goes toward what is familiar and those neural pathways that, have been going on for a long time. And so, we don't, the whole idea of keep making the same mistakes over and over again. That is because it's familiar, not because you like it.
Right. Not because you want it.
Not because you want it, but it's safe. And this is why, being in pain is actually, it's horrible, but for some people it becomes safe. It means they don't have to go out. If, it means they don't have to be vulnerable with people or interact. And they may say, all I want to do is go do that. But then if you ask them about, their sense of safety, they will often tell you, wait, you mean I'd have to try?
Yes.
Or I wouldn't have an excuse anymore. I'm afraid to get better. I wouldn't have the built-in excuse.
And who am I without this?
Absolutely.
Who am I without this trauma? Who am I without this illness? Who am I without depression? Oh my gosh, I actually have to get out of bed and do stuff. Like, who am I? What if I fail? What if I get out of bed and I pursue the goal that I keep saying I want to do, but can't do because I'm depressed, and then I fail? So there's a lot involved in that. And I have to say, somehow those tools come into place when you heal the trauma, because I could have gone through the same thing, like saying like, well, if I remove this, who am I? Like, will I still be as a good of a parent because I'm, I feel like my parenting comes from this trauma, right? And so if I remove this, will I still be that good parent? And the fact is, not only are you that good parent, I feel like I'm a better parent because I'm not projecting the shit from my childhood.
That's exactly right. Again, it's you're in alignment. You're standing within yourself rather than, leaning back and, being reactive and then leaning in to parent or do whatever from a traumatized mind and body.
Right.
We don't make decisions. That's the way the nervous system works. We cannot make good decisions when we are traumatized, because when we're traumatized, it's all about fight, flight, or freeze. It's all about staying safe. But when you heal the trauma, then you're able to access that wise mind, that you hear about in DBT, that wise mind. And that wise mind says, oh yeah, there's a deep hole that I could go down with my narcissistic ex-husband. But no, thanks, not today.
Yeah.
And probably not next week either.
Yeah, exactly. Agree. So it's interesting too, because like, I want to go back to the body image thing. This is a big deal. I was bulimic when I was younger because I was always overweight. And, one of the things I actually worked on in one of our sessions was my body image issues. That was a big deal for me because I've always had weight issues. Always. I didn't grow up eating healthy food, never exercised when I was younger. I remember one of the things that always broke my heart was being called names in school and stuff like that. And so when we did my body image, my exercise routine now I was doing so that I wasn't overweight and that I was staying a physical way. And the funny is, after that, now when I work out, it's because I deserve it. Isn't that so interesting, that shift? It's because I deserve it. It's not to get a goal. It's because I deserve it.
Yeah, it's an act of self-love now. It's not even just self-care.
Yeah, it's not because I'm not shaming myself into working out. It's something I do because I deserve it.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I love that. Yeah, I love that. And it sounded like, from what you said, just how you felt in your body just shifted.
Yeah. it's not like I consciously was like, okay, cool, I worked on my body image things, now I'm going to love working out. Didn't happen at all. In fact, it didn't even occur to me until it was like this week. I love yoga, and I do yoga, like 60 minutes of yoga a day. And it used to be in my mind like, oh, I got to do my workout. Now I'm like, oh, I get to. And I'm like, who's that crazy person who wants to work?
Right.
And now I get it, because you're like,
Yeah.
I want to take care of myself.
Yeah. I
Honestly,
deserve it. I deserve
it.
to take
Yeah.
care. And someone did not take care of me, or many people did not take
Right.
care of me, but I am going to
take care of
be
me.
because when you do that, Barbie, your adult, as you said, is loving that child so deeply. I mean, the most powerful work in art that really, really, I think is life-changing is the sort of inner child dialogue, where you need to, help your younger self, or your younger self needs to help you, or both. And I just love that, because, you're taking care of her the way she was not taken care of.
And it's because I see a future.
Mm.
When you are, it's going to be tears. When you're living in so much trauma, you can't look to the future, because you're just trying to survive today. And it's like, you finally like, oh my gosh, I can see I can have a future. Like, yeah, before I would set goals and stuff like that, but I didn't see a future. I didn't care. You know what I mean? Like, that I lived to see that future.
So wonderful. And I think you speak so beautifully about this idea of, I was surviving, and now I know I can thrive.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. So that goes to, so my next bullet point was that I could find peace. Right. Find like that, there's finally that peace that comes over.
Yeah. And acceptance.
Yeah.
Some acceptance of what was, and the parts you can't change, right? I mean, everybody hears, the wisdom to, accept what you can't change, or whatever. Sorry, I'm ruining the serenity prayer, but everybody knows the serenity prayer, but you're living it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're living it. You're more at peace inside. And, and people are always trying to say, oh, trauma, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And, I call bullshit on all of that.
Absolute bullshit.
Nobody said, I really want to get stronger, so please let me have a terrible childhood so I can be the strongest person.
Right.
You don't need to be strong. You just need to be you.
Yeah. You need to be okay. And I feel like we just aren't, a lot of us just are not just okay. Like, we are tough, and we are strong, and we are, move forward, because of these things that happen to us, and blah, blah, blah. And that I feel like I did a lot with my life because of that, but none of it meant anything, because I just kept trying to move forward to get out of that feeling. Right.
Yeah. And I think I also, sort of what you're speaking to is, I think, the performative nature that happens. It's, and, the thing, I believe therapy, a lot of what therapy is, all kinds of therapy, is identifying your coping mechanisms from childhood that you developed, that are often based on, attachment theory and, home life. And then figuring out that those helped you and they were adaptive. But you're usually sitting in my office when they're maladaptive and they're harming you.
Right.
And I think art just really helps you kind of let go in a more profound, lasting way of those negative coping mechanisms that are harming you. So you're more willing to be vulnerable and to show up for yourself, rather than seeking outside yourself, okay, the promotion, the money, I'm, pleasing everyone else. I'm the strong one. we don't, at the end of our lives, I just don't believe there's a medal for being, fiercely independent and disconnected from ourselves and others.
Right.
And if we do, I don't want it.
No,
I
exactly.
want the award that says, I felt deeply, I loved hard, I got hurt, and I kept doing it.
Exactly. It's interesting because I did think like, okay, well, all of these things are the reasons why I'm an overachiever, right? So if you take away all of these different things, because again, very self-aware, been very self-aware for a long time, doesn't mean that even self-aware people continue to repeat things due to, the triggers and stuff like that, right? So I was aware of what I was doing, but I couldn't stop doing it anyways, right? So I before I began, I was like, well, if I do this, then is the person in me who has that drive that just keeps moving forward, is that person going to go away? Because I like that person. She keeps moving forward. And the answer is no. The difference is you don't move forward out of fear and guilt and pain and all of that stuff. You move forward out of self-love.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing the sort of a voice to this idea of, I think, why we stay stuck in many ways, which is, will I lose my edge? I don't want to give these things up. They've made me who I am. And first of all, it's not like that. You don't trade one in for the other. You quiet the negative aspects of your coping mechanisms. You can still, like, for instance, if you're a perfectionist and, that helped you a lot in your life, but now it's getting in the way of vulnerability and closeness and intimacy. The opposite of perfectionism is not, staying in bed all day and being a bum.
But we think it is.
Right.
Yeah.
The opposite of perfectionism is healthy striving, which is what all of us want.
Right.
But you also deserve rest and play. And you need to feel that you deserve that and that there's a cost. So I just wrote down, I think that people fear, what will I need to give up in order to heal?
Right.
And I don't have a real fabulous answer for that, but I think it's a really good question. And certainly I don't think you have to give up what you think you have to.
I think what you have to give up, this is how I feel. I feel like what you have to give up is your attachment to your story.
Yes.
Yep. Because that story no longer serves you once you're healed. So your attachment to being a victim to it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I would say too, is that you have to give up your attachment to the part of your story that traumatizes you.
Yeah.
You don't have to give up even the whole thing.
Right.
But that part that holds you from being the being you were meant to be, you must give that attachment up. I think that's fabulous. I really do. I think that's so well put.
I love the putting that together and making it, because that is what it is, right?
Yep.
So
and actually, it's funny. I just want to say one thing about that, because you said attachment. Many times, an image that I suggest to someone when they're trying to, get unstuck is, I will often say, I want you to cut the umbilical cord to your depression. I want you to cut the umbilical cord to your critical mother. Because I think that's literally what it does. You've got to cut off the life force that is killing you slowly.
Right. Even if we think it's what's driving us.
Right.
Right. Okay. So then I put on my list, have self-compassion. Man, I was mean to myself. I didn't know I was. I thought I was being that I had compassion for myself. And then I realized, like, I was picking on myself all day long. So, like walking by in the mirror and being like, yep, there's those thighs again, or, there's that cellulite, or like, checking out and be like, do I have is there skin sagging on my chin? Or if I did something wrong, I'd be like, yep, like I've never been good at that, like those kinds of comments. Now, not that they just like magically disappear, but now it's interesting because if I like go into that space, I'm like, ooh, I'm not being nice to myself. Like I got to be nice to myself. So they don't just magically disappear, but you're more aware. And then it's like, ooh, that's like that. Why am I being mean to myself? Like I don't deserve that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You just can kind of you can quickly pull yourself out and recognize how mean and unhelpful that is, and then not go down the rabbit hole, right? Where, I mean, I always tell people, depending on the day I've had, like if I get a parking ticket, depending on the day I have or how I'm feeling about myself in general, my reaction will either be, it's okay, we all make mistakes, that's annoying, or I'm the biggest piece of shit and I always fuck everything up.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Those are very different messages. And my day and week will be very different depending on how I respond.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to address this. So if you're somebody who, okay, you're like, maybe I'm considering this, but I don't know if I want to open Pandora's box, because once I start peeling back the layers on that onion, this might be a long road. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that's interesting because one of the things I tell people when they enter talk therapy with me, especially if it's their first time, is I want to tell you it will probably get worse before it gets better, and that's normal. Because as you said, whether it's the onion, I always say, you're peeling back a rug and you've been pushing shit under there for, 30 years, it's gonna dust up a little bit, right? But art is not like that at all. You can peel a layer off and again, have it be resolved and stay there. Some people are in for 1 to 2 sessions for a single incident trauma, and then they're gone. They don't need to come back. That's the only thing they wanted to work on.
Right.
That's not the way. It doesn't open Pandora's box. However, I believe that when you start having some success with art, you can get kind of hungry. Well, if it worked on that, will it also work on, my hair pulling? And will it work on, my nighttime eating? And will it work on the fact that I stutter? And the answer is yes, 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 it will.
And why do you want to hold on to that anyways, just to prove a point? Like, yeah.
Right.
That
right.
I'm not dependent on art,
Right, exactly. So I don't think it's the same the way it is with talk therapy. And sometimes more things will come up for someone, but it's usually an indication that they've healed something already. It's not because in talk therapy you might talk about something and then it brings up a lot of stuff, but you're not done talking about that thing.
Right.
This, you're usually done with it after a session or two.
And I want to say, like, so for me, yes, I started peeling back these layers, right? And then but every time because I was healed, it wasn't traumatizing to go to the next level. So it was like, okay, I worked on that. Okay, now I want to work on this, but now it doesn't feel like I have to work on this so that it feels like I want to work on this because this is healed over here and now I can heal at this point. And so it's this beautiful, like, not a negative way, like you're not opening up Pandora's box and like getting bad stuff. It's like opening it up and seeing like all these little rocks that have like, words on them that say like this and this and this, and they're all different things. And you're like, okay, well, I did that. So let me pick this rock out and let's work on that so that I can feel better and heal from this. And versus like, I don't want to work on these things because it's going to traumatize me.
Yeah. And I have a very long-term patient who had, left therapy for a while. And then she read about art on my website maybe a year and a half ago. And she said, I really want to come back. I'm getting triggered about a rape. When my husband touches me, I flinch and go into a complete panic attack. And so we worked on that. It got better in one session. And since then, she literally just, is like, okay, so this week I'm, want to work on being reactive at work. And this week I have, had pain in my foot for 2 years, which we, by the way, got rid of, and there hasn't been a second of it since in one session. And I also want to work on this. And I will say that is so fun for me, because I mean, I feel it's like I'm or like I'm just like knocking the pins down that are in this person's way, you know, or like in a shooting gallery, you know, in those carnival games,
Yes.
just like they just go whoop, 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 just clear out. And I just love that. And then there's this beautiful path for the person.
And that's what opens up, right? It's a path of a life that's not filled with reaction and triggers. It's like this, it's like a whoa, like that's what I can say.
It's a clearing.
Right?
It's like a clearing.
Yeah, it's a clearing, and it's clear. It's like clear. It's not like, you know, like, I don't know how else to say it to people, but to say that it gives you a place where you feel like you can move forward, and in a way that you feel happy.
Yeah. And more like your true self, you know, which you've always deserved to be. And, you know, things happen in life and we don't always get that chance and opportunity. And I mean, you know, you're coming into yourself.
Yeah. Coming into yourself, and you get to come into yourself in a place where you love yourself. Yeah. Where you finally feel like well, at least for me, finally feel like deserving and worthy to love myself. And it's not selfish.
No, not at all. And really, I mean, you know, worthiness is something, I mean, I don't really know anyone who doesn't struggle with worthiness on some level somewhere.
Right.
And for some people, it is so big and really, really does come straight from trauma. But everybody can relate to that. If not now, at some point in their lives. And it really, really impedes all the choices we make. You know, when we don't have a sense of worthiness, our ceilings are very low. We're actually afraid of success when we don't feel worthy. And again, not deserving of pleasure, not deserving of ease. My new favorite word is ease.
I love that, because you're right, because there is all of a sudden this ease to things. It's not so hard. Yeah.
And for people who walk around with especially complex PTSD, you know, multiple traumas, everything feels hard, really. Everything.
And you don't realize how hard it was feeling because you're so used to it until you don't have it. And then you're like, wow, I was really suffering.
Yeah.
And before we end, because we're going to wrap up relatively soon, but I want to just talk about this for younger people. And I now that I've gone through this, I feel, and maybe you can give me some feedback on it, that for younger people who maybe they've dealt with a bully, maybe they've had parents that, you know, there's one parent that's, you know, relatively healthy and the other one isn't, or whatever the case may be, or maybe something traumatic happened to them. Maybe they were in a car accident, maybe whatever. Because we carry this stuff into our life without even really realizing it. What a gift to give a young person, to get rid of it now so that they're not reacting to it for the rest of their life.
Totally. And I have worked with young people. It's funny because in talk therapy, I don't work with anyone really under 18, but in art, I'm happy to do that. And unfortunately, a little over a year ago, there was a school shooting in DC. And I volunteered my time to do art. I was like, wait, I literally can help, you know, more so than the, you know, 800 other talk therapists who were lovingly offering their help. But I felt like called, and I worked with people as young as 12. And in one session, we got rid of the, you know, the reactivity to loud noises, the, you know, just the intense anxiety. So it absolutely works for kids. I think people have different comfort levels. I know several art therapists who see people as young as 6. It's obviously, it looks a little bit different. We use different language for young kids. And, you know, you have to make some adjustments because they usually can't sit for as long and the eye movements might need to change a little bit, but it is very effective. You just have to kind of speak their language more. And I totally agree with you. I mean, the other thing I want to say is if you have a traumatic incident, get art immediately.
Yes.
Immediately. You know, and for instance, you know, death is a place, you know, grief and loss and death is actually a place where I've done some of the most meaningful work. And people say, well, you know, how is that going to help? Like the person's dead. What, you know, you can't make a, you know, a scene where they're alive. And I say, you're right, you cannot change the facts, but you can have a better ending. You can say goodbye to that person. That person can tell you they love you and want you to go live a happy life. So a lot of people, especially people returning from, you know, combat and stuff, have a ton of survivor's guilt. Or if you're in a car accident and you survive and someone else doesn't. And people will literally self-sabotage the rest of their lives because they feel so guilty. Well, by doing art around, you know, a traumatic loss like that, you can set yourself free from that guilt. And by creating, because, you know, very rarely does someone, you know, want you to suffer just because you survived. And I always say, I don't believe this person really wants you to pay with your life, but they have to actually create that themselves and do that in their own minds with eye movements. And I've had people feel instantly better about a death. And again, it's a loss, it's grief, but it changes the relationship to the grief where they can really miss the person without being stuck in their own guilt.
Yeah. Or I would imagine, let's say you have trauma in your past or somebody in your past, they've died. So you can't really address things with them and work through the issues with them. So you can do it through this way too.
Oh, that's such a great point. Absolutely. Yes, you can provide yourself the closure that you need. And that, I mean, it can really transform someone.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us if somebody's interested in this, and again, I'll put it in the stuff, but just give us, how do we find this tool to help us in our life?
Sure. So you can go to acceleratedresolutiontherapy.com. And if you're a therapist and you want to be trained in art, which I 100% encourage therapists to do, it prevents burnout, it's fast. The satisfaction and joy I feel is tremendous. It's really a fabulous tool in your tool belt. So you can find out all about the art trainings around the country and in Canada. And you can also go to that same acceleratedresolutiontherapy.com to search for art practitioners throughout the world and, you know, by state. And it's worth it. Art, as you know, can be done virtually.
Yes.
It can also be done in person. They're both equally effective. I have found no difference in terms of what's effective and what's not. And so some art therapists only do in person, but again, I've just been so loving being able to, you know, provide this, you know, even if someone has a chronic illness and they can't, you know, come into the office, we do art virtually and it works beautifully.
And if people want to find you, because we love you, although there's only one of you, we do know this. We do want to share your information too, because you're just so special.
Oh, thank you. So yes, you can find me at brookebralove.com, and Instagram is Brooke Bralove Psychotherapy. And yeah, I want to thank you so much for having me back and allowing me to be part of your journey and witness your growth. It's very rewarding for me, but I'm just really happy for you.
Thank you. And you're not rid of me yet. Don't worry. Although I will happily continue to work on myself because I deserve it.
Yes,
And that's
absolutely.
thanks to art letting me know that. So thank you.
Mhm.
We appreciate
welcome.
you.
My pleasure. It was fun to be here again with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Mm-mm.